Good afternoon, everybody. This is Matt Wiederhold with Heritage Ohio. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on strengthening your business community, the importance of regular check-ins. Our webinar today is sponsored in part by the Ohio Department of Development and the Ohio Arts Council. Registrants will automatically receive a copy of the recording within 1 day, and you may find all of our webinar episodes on our Heritage Ohio YouTube channel. Justin Copenhaver is the CEO and founder of Urality, a technology company dedicated to improving community and economic development. With a 20-year technology background in enterprise things I don't even know how to say, Justin, that you put in there, and augmented reality, Justin has spent the last 5 years working closely with Main Streets and business improvement districts to utilize technology to improve both community-based marketing and economic development initiatives. Justin, thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you all for having me today. A little bit about myself. As Matt said, I come from a technology background. I've been working in technology for 20 plus years. Most of that work has been in the enterprise realm, software as a service, which I think is what Matt was struggling through there in the intro, and geospatial information systems. So I started Urality in 2017 with a completely different concept of how what I wanted to do with it. It essentially started as a technology platform for augmented reality, specifically location-based AR, where you could tie content to the world through your camera and then let people replay that. Now that seems completely different than community development. So as I started to really talk to people about the kinds of problems they were having and what we could do with this sort of location-based technology, and with my previous background, I started to work with Main Streets around 2020, and we started to really think about how you can do community engagement. And that has eventually led me down the path of economic development initiatives. So we have products that sort of focus on the promotional and marketing aspect at the community level. And now we're working on like back of the house kind of stuff with operations and economic development. When I'm not working, which is not very often right now because I'm a solo entrepreneur, I work on some local community projects. I'm currently working on relaunching a local business alliance in my own town. I also work on my house when I have time. So very quickly, our mission and our vision is to create thriving communities where the local business community collaborates and supports each other to drive local economic growth and success. We're really focused on these community-wide efforts where there's a multiplier effect. So think about local businesses that are promoting themselves in their own silos. We want to remove those barriers and really focus on the community as a whole and how you can develop a picture of the community and market and promote that community all in one piece. So today's agenda: why are check-ins important? How check-ins build long-term success within your community? How to conduct effective check-ins? Tools and processes that you can use today? And then we'll do a wrap-up and Q&A. So why are check-ins important? Well, you see, it's the data that's behind the check-ins. So when we talk about data, when you have data, you can do a lot with data, right? You can gauge the current health of the business. So here's an example. Let's say you have a business owner who you're talking to and they put a brave face on and they say, yeah, business has been decent, but you see through the data that they've lost employees over time. And you notice during this particular check-in, they're in the process of losing revenue as well. That could be signaling something is happening that they themselves are not alluding to. Because as a business owner, it's really difficult to feel objective and about your business as you're, explaining how that business is doing. I think any business owner, it's difficult to look at yourself in that way. So when you have this data, you can start to put together a picture of the health of the business. Over time, you want to record any significant changes to the business. So let's say that a business is going through a modernization. Let's say a hair salon is using a new point of sale system in their front of their business, and they are now linked to some sort of scheduling system. So now people can schedule their haircuts online and come in. Those are fairly substantial items that can change the trajectory of their business over time. So it's pretty important to not just record that, but then have that as a data point so you can track those changes over time to see if that investment has really led to more growth. Ensuring coverage across your business community. So having all of this data can help you identify where you may have blind spots in your community. Blind spot could be like a specific type of business. Let's say you have your brick and mortar businesses, your retail and your restaurants. They're taken care of and you talk to them quite often. But then maybe let's say you have professional service businesses that you don't talk to as often because they're not interfacing with the public as much. It's important to show that you have that coverage across your business community, because it's that diversity within the community that's going to help it, stay robust and resilient over times. Identifying community-wide patterns. So again, with the data, you can start to see interesting things emerge or see an overlap of certain data points. So for instance, let's say there are specific businesses have started to identify that staffing is an issue, right? So you can say, okay, across all of my business community, maybe my restaurants are struggling to hire the front staff. Those are community-wide patterns that you can look at and then determine if there are different creative ways to start to solve those issues. Creating a formal pattern for regular communication. I've talked to some Main Street folks in the past, and when you get to the point where you have yourself talking to the business owners, and the business owners have your contact in their phone, and they can, shoot you a text at any time. You're probably a little too close to the business at that point. So, thinking about a formal pattern for communication is really, it's boundary setting. It's letting the businesses know that you're there to support them, but that there is a formal relationship between you and the business community. Prioritizing your efforts to help the business community. Again, if you have this data, you can really start to see, if there are groups of patterns and challenges that are sort of bubbling out of the data. It's important to be able to see that, and then that can help you prioritize those things. And then fulfilling your reporting obligations. The way that you as Main Streets get access to technical assistance is through reporting. So as you think of it as like, yes, it's an obligation, but the better your data is, the better it's going to lead to outcomes to help get more money to come in to support technical assistance for your own community. So let's move on to how check-ins build long-term success. relationship building, reporting and data analysis, and repetition. We're going to dive into all three of these. So this relationship, this is something that you're building with the local business owners. So you check in with the business, you see how the business is doing. And as part of that, you're putting together these the needs that the businesses have, the challenges that they have. And then you start to think about, well, how do I find opportunities that you can present to them? And then eventually we're hopeful that you'll be able to provide technical assistance for those opportunities. And if you think about it, this is an iterative process, right? So think about how one check-in leads to another check-in, leads to another check-in, and you're building that relationship over time. It's lending itself to, gaining trust with the business owners over time. And with that trust, the hope is that you'll get better data over time from those businesses. So when we think about the actual data points that you'd be collecting, it's really important to start with a baseline. And that baseline, you could think of it as, let's say a new business is coming into town. Really the ideal time to capture a baseline is when that business is starting. So you have an understanding of like, well, okay, what's the type of business? What services does the business offer? What amenities are they going to have in the brick and mortar? What hours are they going to be open for? And then you can start to get into some of the other aspects of their business, such as operations and like what technology they're using. But the idea around that is to establish this baseline that with that data, you have the general gist and understanding of how that business is operating. And then you perform a check-in and you start to build that you are essentially adding to that baseline over time. So when you're checking in, you're asking questions like, have you hired any more employees? Have you spent specific money on your business? These are important things that you're going to gather throughout the check-in process. Once you've banked a number of these check-ins, you should be starting to see some trends pop out of that business, and then you can start to put together some insights from that data. So you can start to see, make the correlations to show you what strategies are working to improve the community over time. And then conversely, what may be causing additional pain within the community. Repetition legitimizes. I actually stole this from a YouTube creator he's a musician, but he says it all the time in his YouTube videos. Repetition legitimizes. And really what I'm getting at is consistency is key in this case. Consistency helps you with your data collection, building the case for addressing needs and providing technical assistance. And it honestly has the added effect of continuity planning, because having all of that historical data will make it easier for somebody else within the community to pick that up and say, oh, okay, now I have an understanding of what's going on with this business. So now we're going to talk about some items that you should be thinking about to conduct effective check-ins. We'll talk about time limit, stating your intent, creating a checklist, biggest challenge, referring to previous check-ins, communicate opportunities, and attitude. So when we've worked with other organizations about these check-ins, it's really setting a time limit. This is, once again, a lot of this is boundary setting. You want to set 10 minutes for your check-in. This obviously benefits you because you're only spending 10 minutes on it, but it also benefits the business owner. So you're basically saying like, I need you for 10 minutes and we'll knock this out and then we'll both be on with our days. Stating your intent. So think about how you're starting that conversation. So if I'm going to a business owner and saying, oh, hey, I'm just checking in to see how your business is doing. Well, that's kind of vague. What do you mean by that? So maybe instead of leaving it vague in that space, you say something like, hey, the reason I'm here today is to check in on your business and ensure we are providing support where we can. It should take us no longer than 10 minutes if you have time. So that is framing the conversation a little bit differently. But with that reframing, you're basically, putting this in a window where they can have your attention for that amount of time. And then you ask the questions you need to. They understand the reasons why you're there in the first place. And you get the information you need and you can move along. Creating a checklist. So I know that you folks already have reporting requirements. So a lot of these things are, nothing new. Revenues, resources and staffing, expenditures, those things you're already asking. So is revenue up or down? Did you gain or lose any staff? Have you spent any money on upgrades? And how have you spent that money? Where did the money come from? Those are all important things, but when you're in front of someone and you're asking these questions, it's important to essentially have the checklist there so you can, cross those off and, get the information that you need. So the biggest challenge, have the business owner say in their own words, what is the thing that is challenging you the most right now? What's your most pressing need for your business right now? And don't forget that it's one of those things where if you're asking this question, there's the opening for you to, have dialogue with them about this, but then also you can ask them about it during the next check-in. So you start to build that trust and continuity over time. So biggest challenge. Okay, so this, this person says, we've been struggling with staffing, both the front of the house and the back of the house. So once you have that challenge, you can start to track that over time. And then you can also refer to the previous check-in. And that's essentially having that information readily available. So you can say, hey, I know that you said you were finding it tough to hire new staff last quarter. How are you doing with that? And they can say, oh, well, we had some luck in finding a line cook, but we're struggling to find front of the house people. So at least you're establishing that rapport and that candor with that business owner over time. So look, if you're managing, 50 to 100 businesses in your community, how are you supposed to track all of that over time? You're not. And the way that you can do that is through recording it and making sure that you have a record of it so you can review it before your check-in. And so you have that information to lean back to, but it helps you, gain that trust of that business owner if you can, reflect and reference back to a previous discussion that you had with them. So communicating opportunities. This is one of those things that sort of depends on how you're structured and how your community works. So open opportunities could be grants, could be other types of programs, whether it's training, whatever it may be. Organizationally, if you don't have the bandwidth to offer that assistance, you don't offer it. But there are lots of other organizations, as I've come to learn, that are definitely interested in helping out. So I've recognized that a lot of banks will open opportunities because they're using opportunities like, whether it's a business startup loan or some sort of incubator, they're interested in that because they want more customers. And so if there's a way that you can partner with another local institution and leverage their expertise, their money, whatever it may be, to get resources back into your community, that's definitely a tactic you can use. And the most important thing out of everything that I just said is really thinking about how you are interfacing with that business owner when you go to that business. So if you go in there and let's say, look, we all have bad days, right? So if I'm having a bad day, and I go to that business owner and I act confrontational to that business owner, how do you think they're going to respond to that? So one of the things that you should really be thinking about is how you are going into that conversation. They are sharing a lot of information with you that they may feel requires a certain level of trust. So the more that you can, bring curiosity to that discussion and ask some follow-up questions during that conversation will impact how open the business owner is to sharing information with you in the first place. Some bonus pointers that I added after I went through this the first time. There's no need for perfection here. We really want you. We don't want people to be reading a script and having that exactly be the thing that you're relaying, right? This is a conversation that you're having with business owners. As long as you're getting that data, that's the most important thing as part of this conversation that you're having with the businesses during a check-in. Don't overcommit yourself. As a business owner, I deal with this myself, but also ask yourself if you've overcommitted yourself. So it's important to understand that having this data is important, but if you can't achieve getting that data for all of your businesses, you have to start thinking about some creative solutions that will help you get that data. Maybe it's unrealistic in the month of December to go around to every single business and ask them how their business is doing when their focus is selling in the month of December for Christmas. So just something to think about how that relationship evolves with your community and your local business owners. So, figure out what works best for both of you and gravitate toward that. And don't forget that you're providing a service to the business owners. This gets back to my discussion point earlier. You may be friends with your business owners, but in your capacity as a business owner or as a advocate for the business community, you're not their friend. You are providing a service to them, and it's important for you to maintain a level of rapport and trust with the business owner, and that will help with how you interface with every single business owner. This is really a matter of consistency, and if you're asking the same questions over and over again, it becomes routine, it becomes habitual, it helps you with how you're doing your work, but then having that, essentially setting that boundary ensures that you are, acting as the service provider to the business owners. And I think that's really important. So let's talk about the tools and the processes you can use to do all of these check-ins, right? Good old pen and paper. So one great thing about, let's say I'm walking up to a business and I'm going to go check in with a local business owner. One great thing about using a pen and paper is that there's literally no barrier getting in the way of having a conversation, right? You can look at that person in the eyes and you can talk to them and you can transcribe all of that information. Obviously, there are some downsides to that though, because you have to have your script ready to know what questions you're going to ask during that time. And unfortunately, you're going to have to duplicate effort there because whatever you put into your notepad is going to have to go into some other form for reporting purposes. So let's say, okay, I want to use something electronic. So spreadsheet, that's great. I can use a spreadsheet. You can organize that in any way that you see fit. You can use it in the background when you're talking to someone on the phone, or if you're conducting a Zoom call. So you can have your spreadsheet open and just go through the questions. You can use all the tools that are linked into the spreadsheet itself to generate graphs and see trends of things over time. But there are some cons to using spreadsheets. It requires a lot of maintenance to keep it clean. So think about every time that you're capturing a check-in, you're loading up that spreadsheet, you put in the date, you put in the answers. It starts to get a little hairy after time, right? Because it's all captured in one place. The input method is not great either, because you're constrained to that cell and you're constrained to how the spreadsheet is working. So unless you're building some customized spreadsheet to get all this data, you're still going to have to go back and clean up a lot of things. The other thing is that this is not presentable in any way to the business owner. So I couldn't send this spreadsheet to a business owner and say, hey, will you fill this out for me? That's not part of what you can do in this process. And then the other way you could conduct this is through, using tools like a CRM and a survey platform. And from the standpoint of using these products, yes, you can create a nice presentable SurveyMonkey survey that you can send to your business owners and they can fill out the form. If you link systems together properly, there's much less work that you're doing on your end. So there's a lot less duplication that has to happen. And depending on how you set things up, there's a lot of automation. So you can start to add some really nice things like, let's send out an email to let them know that we're going through our check-in process. And you can send a follow-up email that shows what they answered during the check-in. But then the other side of that, there's a couple cons to that, obviously, is you're losing some face time depending on how you're doing that. So if you're implementing it as, you're sending a link to the business owner, complete it at their own convenient time, you're losing that face time. That may not be enough in a lot of cases. It's one of those fire and forget. They may see an email coming from you and say, oh, well, I can ignore that. And that's not going to help you get more data, right? So there's advantages and disadvantages to these things, right? So that is the short version of what I had to say today. I will open it up for Q&A if there is any.
Thanks, Justin. If anyone has any questions, you can type those into the chat right now. Matt, do you have any announcements to make?
Yeah, Justin, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation, and it really drives home the importance of building those relationships and working with the businesses. I appreciate that you said you're providing a service. You are not their friend. That's a very fine line which one must respect. We do webinars on a monthly basis. Again, they're supported in part by the Ohio Department of Development and the Ohio Arts Council. We hope you join us for our next webinar on July 19th with a presentation by Restoration Housing. Restoration Housing is a nonprofit organization in Virginia that develops affordable rental properties benefiting limited income individuals and families through the preservation of neglected historic structures. I think this is going to be a fascinating discussion about a nonprofit saving historic neighborhoods and houses and renovating them in a sympathetic way to the history of the house and making those available to limited income individuals and families. Again, that's July 19th. You'll find more information on our website, and it will be on Facebook soon. Devin, do we have any questions in here?
Yes. First question is, can you tell us more about your company and what services do you provide?
What a good segue, because I have some slides for that. So I will continue along. So just some more of a background in how I got here, right? So when we got to the point of starting to work with communities, we really focused on storytelling. And it was focused more on building and sharing hyperlocal stories and then having a way to discover that. My background is that I worked, so I worked for a DoD contractor for a number of years. This goes back into like the late 2000s, early 2010s. And one of the pieces of work that I did was for the DoD, Department of Defense, a GIS-based wiki tool that was being used by the military in the battlefield to capture information regarding things that they were doing in the battlefield. You know, human intelligence, pictures on the ground, that sort of thing. And it always fascinated me that they could, get all this information about people and history and culture, and we weren't even doing that in our own communities. So that was a driver for why I started the company in the first place. And then I really started to realize when I was talking to people that this could be a really powerful tool for promoting and marketing within communities. So our primary clients are Main Street orgs, economic development corporations, and business improvement districts. We operate in 5 states right now. We have 2 primary offerings right now. Engage is our community-wide marketing product, and that's, we've been out with that since 2020. In terms of what that really looks like, the data that you work with and Engage, you can generate community directories, community calendars, community maps, along with, I'm going to use the term story maps. Some of you may be familiar with ArcGIS's story map feature. It's similar in construct, but a little bit different how we do it. With that, we have tour capabilities that, let's say you have a historic tour that you want to do of your downtown. You basically set the points of interest and you tell our system, I want to create a walking tour with these 8 points, and we provide turn-by-turn directions for the person who's viewing it on their mobile device to essentially conduct the tour themselves. It's self-guided. Along with that, we do digital placemaking. So think about wanting to share particular information at a location, or explain like an explainer at a location. We support that through QR codes that you can print and put at the site. For events, we support digital check-ins. Essentially, scan a QR code, provide some information. You can do extended campaigns for things like restaurant weeks. And along with that, with your community, there is this concept of being able to contribute content. So you can have trusted people in your community add content to your community, or people can share their own events, their own pins on the map, and you moderate all of that content into there. So you're sort of curating a collection within the community. Last year, we developed a relationship with a economic development consultancy in Boston, Massachusetts, and that has led to us developing Unified, which is part of where our check-in feature is coming from. That's a community relationship assistant. It's a AI-powered CRM and GIS system tied together, that gives you the ability to do business onboarding and business check-ins through our survey component, and then manage events. That's talking to local businesses, and the life cycle for vendors, volunteers, sponsors, being able to manage the communications with them. So we do have a component that ties to emails, so you can track those communications with those businesses and those participants over time. You know, from the perspective of the Engage product, you know, I'm a strong proponent of the value of digital tools, but one of the things that I don't like about digital tools today is that they're focused on keeping your attention in the platform that you're in instead of discovering what's happening in the real world. So we provide the tools that you need to, you know, do those physical to digital activations in the real world. And then, you know, unified, I've already explained this, so I'm not going to dwell on it, but the idea is really with, and where I think we're doing some things that are brand new. We're utilizing AI with our CRM, and what that opens is, you know, looking at different dimensions within your community. So think about, so you run events, right? Let's send a targeted email to all my women-owned businesses because we want to have an event that brings all those small businesses together, and we promote it as a women's market. So all women-owned businesses supporting and marketing their wares. And that is something that you can do end-to-end with our data in minutes. You can find all your women-owned businesses, you can send a targeted email to them, you can create an event that sends an invite to all of those businesses. You can get all that information back, and you can create a promotional event that you can share with your community, all within a short amount of time, you know, 3 or 4 minutes to do all of that. And that's kind of the power once you have all of this data behind the scenes. And, you know, as I talked about during the presentation, having that business profile, you can start to do a lot of things with that once you have that level of information. That's what I have to say on that.
Thanks, Justin. We have a couple questions, sort of best practices. The first one is, how often should people be checking in with the business?
I know that this varies based on what we've heard anecdotally. We prefer, and we've recommended that people are checking in quarterly. There's a lot you can lose if you're only checking in once or twice a year, and there's a little too much if you're checking in all the time. So there's a certain cadence. And then I think the other thing is that you don't necessarily always have to be there to do that check-in. So we're looking at different ways, and you know, from a best practice standpoint, we've talked about it with some of our partners. It's really like, if you do one face-to-face check-in a year, that's fantastic. But you should always have some way of checking in regularly. Now, if it's one face-to-face check-in, 2 Zoom calls, and you know, maybe you send a survey at the end of the year to get that data because everyone's busy, right? It's kind of up to you to decide how to best capture and you know, manage that within your community. But we have seen people gravitate towards like quarterly check-ins as being the cadence that makes the most sense.
Thanks, Justin. Next question is sort of thinking about, you know, the amount of time that you're investing. If somebody does have a problem, since you've asked them about it, really, how long should people be dedicating, as a kind of a benchmark? If it's something simple, obviously, you can do it. But, if it's kind of a complex problem, really, do you have any like guidance on, if it's more than an hour's worth of work, you should really be passing it on to either another nonprofit, government, anything like that?
Well, I'm guessing that we're talking about the time that's spent outside the check-in, right?
Correct.
So yeah, I mean the answer to me would be if you have the skills internally to manage it, find out who else is having that problem and bring those people together to talk about it. But if it's outside of your wheelhouse and something you don't do, then yeah, I would find someone to partner with that is going to help with that, because it's not up to you to solve everyone's problems, right?
Yep. And get sort of, kind of going down a similar road here. So every downtown, has one or two of those more curmudgeonly individuals that own businesses.
Yep.
Really, you have any advice for people? Somebody's not really interested in the check-in one year, but really with those businesses, how often should they still be making those touches with them, whether or not the individual is going to be approachable to them, or if they might change their opinion down the road, but anything like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, and I think it's really important here is that when you build a boundary with the business and you state what you're doing this for and that it's benefiting them, that should be building confidence in why you're doing it in the first place. If they're going to be a curmudgeon about it, it's going to be very difficult if somebody just automatically says no for the sake of saying no. Like that's a difficult position. What I would say is without going too far into the weeds of what you need to do in order to get the data you need, work with them up to a point, right? So if they won't make themselves available, then ask them, or let's say they're not making themselves available in person, and say, okay, can we hop on a phone call? They don't want to do a phone call. Ask them if they want to do a survey. You like meet them in the middle for a bit, but then if they're not responding to that, it really is about building that trust with them and helping them understand that you're doing this to help the community. You're not doing anything to hurt them, right? Like this is only supposed to be helping the community overall. But yeah, those businesses are really difficult to deal with, and I've heard some horror stories, and it's a tough situation to be in.
That's good advice. Thanks, Justin. Kind of, just going off of something else you said too, with AI technology, where do you kind of see some AI applications surrounding this in the near future? Let's just say like 5 years.
Sure. What I would say with AI is that it's going to help a lot with the mundane tasks that as a Main Street manager or a community organizer, things that you may not want to do as part of your work, or things that are time consuming, are going to be helped with that sort of technology in one way, shape, or form. I specific examples I think about, it's not going to be long before your email client will have a box and it'll say, what kind of email do you want to write today? And you're going to type something in. You'll be like, I want to send a notice to my businesses that this road's going to be closed make it a happy email. And it will write that email for you, right? And so I think that there's some things that are going to be automated that are time consuming for you that will help you in the long run. I'm not one of those doomsdayers that thinks that AI is going to take over everything. But I think that it's going to be really pertinent for people to know how to use the tools. Because, you know, your data, you're not sharing your data with the AI, right? What you're doing is you want to be able to interface with that computer and tell it what you want from it, right? So when we talk about what we're doing in our own company in regards to AI, it's really empowering that data and doing things with it that would take you a long time to find out, like finding trends and insights through that data that you may not even know to ask, right? So it's learning from best practices and giving you ways to slice and dice data that you hadn't seen before. And that's another piece of that is I know everybody loves reporting, like those end of year reports that like look at all the good we did last year. It would be great to automate some of that, right? So you have all this data. What can you do? Well, hopefully in the long run, you can push a button and say, generate this report for me, please, and it will do it. And that's where I think there's going to be a lot of value gained from using these tools.
That's great, Justin. I'm very happy if AI can help me be more positive in my emails. Matt, do you have any final comments? I don't see any more questions coming in.
Once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Justin, thank you for sharing your expertise and knowledge. And we look forward to seeing how this rolls out and how this can benefit our communities. So everyone have a great afternoon and have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you.